So we're going to talk about scaling and the setup, which is paramount to a go-kart racer, understanding in outlaw karts how to go about scaling your kart, what tools to use, and what things you really need to pay attention to. So there's a few primary things that you need to do to get started. One, you have to have a set of scales. Now, you can buy different varieties of scales. The set that we have are a set of long acre scales that have a cord. You can buy cordless scales. You can buy all of those kind of things. The way that your scales are set up is paramount to your kart being scaled correctly. If you are going to try a different setup than this, I would advise against it. Everything centers around scaling your kart, and it needs to be level. The best way to get level with a set of scales is with a digital level. A digital level goes to 0. It will tell you when it is dead on level. You're going to want to level it from multiple angles, which I'll go through in a second of how you want to go about doing that. But a digital scale or digital level is the way to go. You can also use a regular level, bubble level, but you're going to want to pair it with a digital angle finder so that you can be extra precise that your scales are level from all directions. I've seen a lot of people try different ways. They think they have a level floor. They think that their trailer's level. They think that all kinds of ways to try to scale their car. Those ways, frankly, are not precise enough. You need to have a scale set up, something similar to this, or a scale table that you can precisely level. If you're going to be at the racetrack, I highly suggest you get some pavers, some 12-inch pavers. You put those down, you put your scale stand on top of those and your scales on those, and you level from there. You need to make sure that when you put the kart on, that the scales do not move. Don't forget that we're talking 16ths of inches. A 16th of an inch in cross can change the way that your car acts. So what I'm going to talk about is how to set up these scales. That's the first thing. And so what I have is a digital level. I have a 5-pound weight. I have 2 different types of toe and camber gauge tools. The one that I have here is a Pro Line. You can buy both of these. They both work really well. Some people have a preference one way or the other. To be honest, we don't really care. Whatever one you have, you want to make sure that it's accurate. You want to test and make sure that the levels that are inside these are actually level. So put them, create a level surface and double check and make sure that everything is accurate before you go on and use those, which we're going to talk about here in a second. What we do is we set up the scale stands, and you may have a scale table, but we have scale stands that we're going to use today. They're very easy to set up. There isn't a lot to it. You have 2 pieces, and you typically have a tube in the center. Some have multiple tubes, so on and so forth. You guys can figure that out. It's not rocket science. What we do is we put the scales on here. Now, when we put the scales on here, we need to be very conscious of where each scale pad goes. Each one, as you can see on these, they have labels on them. Right front, left rear, right rear. You need to make sure that those are the positions that you're going to put the car in when you put the car on the scales. You want to make sure that all of your connections are snug and tight. You want to make sure that it is reading correctly. The easiest way to check if it's reading correctly is to take a known weight. This just happens to be a 5-pound weight. And you want to set it on all 4 scale pads and make sure that it's reading 5 pounds on the interface on all of those. If it's not, check level, make sure there isn't something weird going on with your scales. If you have to, you can send your scales back in to Longacre or whoever you bought your scales from, and they can recalibrate those scales for you. I've seen it happen multiple times. It's not unusual. It's not a big deal, but you definitely need to do that to make sure that you're on the same ground you are every single time that you scale your car. So we talked about that. The next thing is when you're going to level this, the first thing you want to do is I would typically set one corner. Doesn't really matter what corner you set, but I would set one corner and use that as your mean. Use that as the baseline for the rest of these pads. Then what I do is I take the digital scale, the digital level, and I want to check level this direction, make sure that it's 0. I want to check level here. I want to make sure that it's 0. I'm going to do this all around these scales the same way. So I've done this side, then I'm going to check for level on this side. What do I do when it's not level? Well, what you have to do is what you'll notice on most scale stands is that there's usually a double nut, or there better be, down here. These double nuts allow you to adjust the height up and down of these scales. That's how you're going to get this level, and you're going to continually move around these scales until it's level from all directions. We also like to go corner to corner. Make sure that we have a 0 reading here, and make sure that we have a 0 reading here as well. Remember, leave one corner static and adjust all the other corners until you have a perfectly level base. Don't forget, make sure this base is solid. It cannot move. It cannot rock. When the car's on there, when the driver's in it, it cannot move. Once you have this at 0 all the way around, you've then taken your 5-pound weight, your 7-pound weight, whatever, and you've tested all 4 corners. You are now ready to scale. You are physically ready to scale. The next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that you have 3 things ready to go. You're going to need your driver. I suggest you have all of their equipment. You're also going to need your setup sheet. What setup are you going to be putting on this car? When you go to the scales, this is not a place to be guessing. One, you want to bring your car in if you've raced and see where you're at from the last time you scaled. And you want to make sure you have that recorded. So we have a scale setup sheet here that we're going to use when we scale a car. We know exactly where the numbers are at and where we want it to be when we come to this. The other thing is you want to make sure the car is completely ready to be raced. That means the stagger needs to be set. The stagger is going to affect everything. It's going to affect cross, it's going to affect left side weight. You need to make sure that your stagger is ready to go as well, including air pressure. So a little bit of a tech tip on leveling the scales. A really easy way we found to work really good is to, as we said, we start here and we get this one set. We're not going to change this one. This is where everything is going to level to. But then what we do is we start right here. We get these 2 level to each other. Once these are level to each other, now what we're going to do is we're going to pivot the level this way, and we're going to level that one and make sure it's level to this pad. Then we're going to pivot here, and we're going to make sure this pad is level to this pad. Now, you'll still want to go back through it, go all the way around and check angles that we may not have done, like this one, just to double check. But this is sort of a shortcut to get your scaled level and not really have to chase the level around. So as we're getting ready to scale this car, some of the things that we're going to want to do and have ready to go. We're going to want to have a weight to represent the fuel. So the fuel in this car is 3 liters of fuel, which is about 4.7 pounds. So what you're going to want to do is, if you don't have fuel in the car, which a lot of times we don't when we're actually scaling the car, we will have a chunk of lead that we'll have removed some until we get it right to the 4.7 pounds of fuel. And we'll want to place that right on the fuel tank area so that it can sit there when we're scaling the car. Now, as you can see, we have an invisible driver today. You won't have an invisible driver. We'll have a real driver. We have to have our real driver in the car. We prefer them to be suited and have their helmet. It's not paramount, but it's nice to be as accurate as possible. Remember, attention to detail. Every detail matters. Have the kid in the car, have them ready to go, have their hands positioned on the wheel, ready to be scaled. What you would also want to do as well is try to keep their foot off of the brake and try to keep their foot, when you're checking scale numbers, all the way pushed down on the accelerator in the way that they would be positioned when they're actually on the racetrack. And well, how do you keep the car from falling off the scales? You're going to have to block one of the wheels. We have a block that we've used for years that we put over there to keep the cart from rolling. The next thing that you're going to want to look at is you're going to want to look at the steering lock. Before you go on and tow this car and check the camber, you're going to need to check the steering lock on this car. So the steering lock is also relative to the position of the pitman arm. The pitman arm down here in the center between our pedal extensions, you want to have your driver position that pitman arm so that it's relatively straight to how they want to hold the wheel and how they want to position the wheel. Once you have that lined up where you want it, you want to check that the steering lock here is lined up so that the pin can go into the hole of the top piece down into the block itself. Now, if the positioning of the pitman arm creates it where the lock itself will not allow the pin to enter the hole, then what you need to do is take the Allen, loosen the top portion of the steering lock, slightly move it so it aligns, tighten it back down, and then the pin should go right in to the steering lock. Now you're ready to set the toe on the car. So we have our basic toe gauge set up here for towing, doing the camber on the car, which we'll get to here in just a second. But I want to talk about the gauge. So the gauge that we like, we have found that the Pro line is the most accurate gauge. Everything fits really well. There's not a lot of slop, stuff like that. And so this gauge works really well. One of the things you need to know is on the right side of the car, depending on the car that you have, depending on the Nerf bars you have, you may need to remove this Nerf bar to be able to use whatever toe gauge you have, or you may need some sort of extension. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you, you're going to need these two parts from the Pro line, and you're going to screw this one in the end. This is for a thick wall axle. This piece, you're going to want to slide into the shoulder, this piece right here, into the axle, right up to the shoulder. Simply goes in the end of your axle, and it's installed pretty easily. Then you have the mirror. This mirror has a little bit of a tightening screw right here, little place for it to slide on that piece of steel. This is pretty easy. You just loosen it up until it slides onto the tube, like that. Then you tighten it down and just snug it, because we're probably going to need to adjust it to this when we install it. Then you take the tool, the Pro line tool itself. You remove the little bit of lock pin right there and the castle nut from the end of the spindle axle. Then this end is threaded, and this threads right onto the end of the spindle axle. Once it'll snug itself down, then you want to make sure that the side that has all the numbers on it has a hole in the middle, and that's the laser. If I push the button, you can probably see the laser right there. We need that laser to face the back of the car. So that laser needs to face the back of the car and needs to hit the mirror. You'll notice when you first put it on, it's probably not going to line up. Well, you'll notice my little dot over here is not on the mirror. So I need it to be on the mirror. The reason that it needs to be on the mirror is it needs to reflect from here back to the front. And if you look, you can see as I move the mirror, you'll notice it goes across that. So now we can look at it and we can see here's exactly where the toe is set. Bounces off, and it shows us our toe is set at toe out, just a little bit less than a 16th toe out is where it's set on this car right now. Now, we're going to want to go ahead and get this adjusted. And we didn't have to remove the Nerf bar in this case, but you may have to remove the Nerf bar on the right side of the car to go about doing this. So we have the Pro line installed, the mirror installed in the rear, and we have the tool installed in the front. We're making sure the level on the outside, the bubble is in the center of the level, so it's level on the outside as well. And then we're lighting up the laser. We're going to look for the laser to hit here. It's bouncing off the mirror and it's hitting here. Right now, we can see that we are towed in almost a 16th of an inch. What we prefer is to start at a 16th towed out. So I've loosened the tie rod jam nuts on both ends of the tie rod that allow us to turn the tie rod. This is how you adjust the toe on the car. As I turn the tie rod towards me, it's going to tow in the car. So the tire is going to tow in. As I turn the tie rod towards the rear of the car, you can see the dot moving. I'm turning the tie rod towards the rear of the car. That is causing the tire to tow out. We want to start with a 16th towed out. So as you can see here, we're at 0 now. As I turn this tie rod, it's moving the dot to a 16th towed out. Now, if I just adjust the mirror just slightly, I can get that laser to come up on there You can see, oh, you can see I'm way off now. So what I need to do is make sure that my adjustment, as I adjust this tie rod, puts that laser right on a 16th. I want to check my bubble on the end, make sure it's level. And then I want to make sure that I'm back on this again. So sometimes it takes a little bit of back and forth before it lines up. And now you can see I am dead on a 16th. Toed out is where we like to start. Now what you need to do is you need to tighten the jam nuts while watching your laser. You have to tighten both jam nuts on both ends of this tie rod. One is a left-hand jam nut, one is a right hand. When you do it, you want to watch this dot because you're going to take one of the 9/16 wrenches and there should be a little indentation in the tie rod that allows you to hold the tie rod with that 9/16 inch wrench, just like that. Then you could come in here and snug up these jam nuts. Then you want to go back and check, is the dot where it should be? In this case, it's still accurate. So now we're going to work on the camber for the right side of the car. If you look at the gauge right now, once again, we want to check the bubble on the side. The bubble is level, so we're good there. And I've shut the laser off because I don't need it for camber right now. But you can see that I want 3.5. Okay, I want 3.5 negative camber on the right side of this car. I'm nowhere near that. So how am I going to make that adjustment? Well, I'm going to make that adjustment over here. The first thing that I need to do is there's a little bit of a safety lock pin right here that I need to undo right there and pull that out of the back of the Heim. There's a safety cord that won't let that go anywhere. I can set that aside. That's fine. This castle nut and this jam nut right here are going to determine the position of this Heim in the caster block right here. If this Heim goes in that way, it's going to give me more negative camber. If the Heim goes towards the outside of the car, it's going to give me positive camber. And so the way that I'm going to do that is I want to loosen these. So first I'm going to loosen the jam nut that's right here. I'm going to loosen it slightly. And then I'm going to loosen the castle nut on the inside. Now, what has to happen here is I know that this Heim has to go in to give me the negative camber that I need. So if it needs to go in, I know that this one's going to have to be pretty loose. This jam nut is going to have to be pretty loose. And I can use the torque of this castle nut to pull the Heim into the center of the car and give me the camber that I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to loosen this jam nut right here. Get it about as loose as I can get it. And then I'm going to use this castle nut to pull the Heim through. And as you can see, it's already moving. I'm at 1.5 already. So I'm going to just keep turning this castle nut and pulling that Heim in until I can get to the number I'm looking for. So you can see I'm at about 2.5 now. I'm going for 3.5. I'm going to loosen my jam nut some more. Okay, so now I have 3.5 is where I wanted to be on negative camber. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tighten down the jam nut over here, make sure it's snug. And I'm going to tighten down the castle nut as well on this side. Then I'm going to take the pin, the little lock pin that we had over here. We're going to put it through the end of the Heim and make sure that everything's nice and tight and put back together. The other thing that you want to do while you're in here is check the caster as well and make sure you have your caster at the numbers that your car needs to be successful. So typically we're running 11 and 7 casters. So we're going to have 11 on this side and we're going to have 7 on the other side. All right, so we're on the left side of the car. We're going to do the toe and the camber over here as well. Then we'll move on to maybe a cross adjustment. So what we want to do is we've got the back piece in with the mirror like we did on the right side. And we have the gauge up here mounted to the spindle, like same as we did on the other side. Same process. We're going to turn the laser on. It's reflecting off the mirror and coming back up here. we'll notice that it's at about an eighth inch. That's not really where we want it. We want to be on toe on the left side. We like to start at about 0. And so I have the jam nuts on the tie rod loosened on both ends so that I can make the tie rod adjustment. And I'm checking the level. It's level out here. And you can see as I turn the tie rod on this side, if I turn towards me, it's going to toe in. If I turn it towards the back of the car, it's going to toe out. I want 0. So I need to turn the tie rod towards me to move the laser in towards the 0. I'm going to turn it till I get to the 0. Oh, I need to loosen it just a little bit more here to get to my 0 number. I'll loosen up those cam nuts just a little bit more. And now I should be able to get to the 0 dead on. Dead on 0 right there for that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tighten up those jam nuts on the tie rod. And I want to watch the gauge as I tighten those guys so that it doesn't move. Sometimes you'd be surprised, they can move quite a bit if you're not careful. So I'm going to go ahead and snug that one up and snug the other end up. Now I have the toe set. So next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and move on to setting the camber, which we're going to do in the same manner as we did with the other side. We want to check the end again. We have level here, so we don't want to mess with this. On this end, what we want to do is we want to put this at about a positive. So this is positive. Positive camber is pushing the tire down towards the ground. We want to go to about a positive half. And you can see I'm pretty darn close, but I think I want to make just a slight adjustment to get it to the bubble to be the center of a half. That's a positive half right there that I'm going for. So the way that I'm going to go ahead and do that is I'm going to loosen the castle nut over here, and I'm going to loosen the jam nut that's hooked to the hind. I'm going to make my adjustment. And I went just a little bit too far, so we're going to bring her back just a little bit. Now the bubble settles in, and you can see I'm right at a half. So now what I need to do is take both my wrenches, tighten up that castle nut, tighten up that jam nut on that heim, make sure that my caster is set at 7 on the left side, and I should be good to go. We're ready to check the scale numbers and make a cross adjustment. So now that we have the toe and the camber set, we may need to make a subtle adjustment, but what you want to do is look at the steering wheel and look at the alignment of the steering wheel for your driver. If the steering wheel is not aligned exactly how your driver wants it, now that the toe lock's set and the steering wheel is in here, the nice thing about this steering wheel is that it's not welded on. This spline system that we have, we're the only one that is selling one of these spline systems right now for Outlaw Karts, is you can come in here and remove this nut, and you can adjust this, micro adjust this to align the steering wheel exactly how your driver wants it. It's pretty easy the way that it works. If you look at the part here that we sell, this is the quick lock, right? And so this piece right here, that piece that bolts onto the spline shaft, has the little tiny splines in it. These little splines allow you to rotate, subtle rotation. You can move it one spline at a time to really get that steering wheel adjusted exactly how your driver wants it. Once you have that adjusted, you can snug down that nut. Make sure you have the lock ring on the back sides, but you can snug that nut down, and you can really do a precision alignment of the steering wheel. And so you can see that if I need to move the steering wheel a subtle amount, I can just turn it one little spline. Super easy to turn one spline at a time to adjust the alignment of the steering wheel to your driver's preference.